Hello, everybody. So you guys are the survivors to Sunday. I like it. Give you guys a round of applause. Well done. I can't wait to go home and go to bed, to be honest. I'm tired. But anyway, welcome to Sunday. Welcome to the Terry Brooks Spotlight panel. My name is Shawn Speman. I am the author of The Dark Thorn, the editor of Unfettered. I write for Penguin Random House and their science fiction fantasy blog, Unbound Worlds. I own Grim Oak Press. As you can imagine, I am a book guy. And but for 22 years, I have moonlit as a superhero. No, I haven't. I have been the webmaster for one of our age's best fantasy writers, and I've had that honor and privilege, and I've gotten to know him very well, and obviously I know his work very well, just like many of you in the audience. So why don't we give him a round of applause as I invite him up, Mr. Terry Brooks. Hi.
Aged, huh?
No, he didn't say aged, he said ages.
Ages.
Ages?
Ages. For the ages, like Rock of Ages, but Terry Brooks, Rock of Ages.
I don't like that word either.
So I figure we'll definitely open the mic up in the middle of the room for questions if any of you have questions in about 20, 25 minutes or so. But to start with, I'm going to ask some questions of Terry and see if we can get to the root of the reason why he does what he does. So next month sees the 41st year of the publication of The Sword of Shannara.
Who knew?
Did you have any idea when you were writing that book and going through editing with Lester Del Rey, did you have any idea of what you were starting?
Well, are you kidding? Yeah, sure, I knew the whole thing. I could see it as clear as day. My goal was very simple. Write this book, make it good enough that a publishing house would look at it and get lucky enough that someone would publish it. And then maybe it would find an audience. That was the goal. And I was talking about this yesterday when you talk about writing a book. It was never written for the audience it found, as it turned out. It was written for the Tolkien audience. And that's a big audience covering a lot of people, which I like to. I had a wide group of people to maybe draw in, but my audience turned out to be all young and male. So there you go, under 25 and male, 1977.
So you mentioned the young and male aspect of this. So when Sword published. And I'm assuming that people sent letters to Del Rey about the lack of strong female characters in that book.
Well, they did.
And so how soon did you receive your first letter after that?
I don't remember anymore. It wasn't right away, but after a while, after it had become really successful and popular, I began to get letters, and then after going out on the road for the 82 or so, or 81, people coming out and fronting me with this and saying, how come there's no major female characters in your book? And I said, gee, I never thought about it, which is the wrong answer. So they didn't actually say, why don't you go home and think about it? But they said things like, would it be really nice if can you not write about female characters? And I thought it was kind of weird. I have just been sort of mimicking what Tolkien did. And there's no major female characters there either, unless you go to the movie. They're all peripheral characters at best. So, and I thought, I was not thinking about it at the time, and I live in a matriarchy. And so it just seemed logical that I should, for the second book, work very hard to have strong female characters, which I think I ended up with two of my best characters in Elfstones. But then, since then, I think I got carried away. I think I've been writing about too many female characters since then now, but I can't seem to stop myself. I keep going back to the same questions I have about what would, a female character do in this situation, and then looking at the thought behind it. And that's really true with the series I'm working on right now, which has several female characters, one very young, This is Fall of Shannara, and it has a very young female character who is kind of well, she's an inheritor of the wish song. And then I have a second one who is a princess of another nation. And the two of them, between them, are pretty tough cookies. And they're both looking for something very different. So the question I have when dealing with people like this is, why do they want this? And how is it going to play out when it turns out they're going to have more choices than they thought and more obstacles than what they thought they were going to encounter?
So you brought up the books that you're writing right now. It's a 4-book set. It is considered the chronological end of the Shannara series, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So that means you're never going to write another Shannara book, right?
Yeah, I know that. Everybody comes up and says, not everybody, but a lot of people are coming up and saying, oh, I hear you're not writing any more Shannara books. And I'm just, what? That's not true. I'm writing more Shannara books. I'm just not writing any more. Because I'll end up like Robert Jordan or somebody, and I'll be dead, and I won't have finished this, or they will say, hey, I don't think he finished this. Let's get somebody in to finish it for him. So I'm writing what I think will be the definitive ending of the story, and then I can go back and work on, well, just as any number of places I can drop in and write the story. I definitely want to spend some time in the prehistory, because I left that hanging after Measure of the Magic, and and everybody comes and says, where's the third book? Well, there isn't a third book, I say. And they say, well, what do you mean there's not a third book? Don't you always write 3? I said, no, I don't always write 3, but anyway, there's still no third book. There's another series coming, yes, but I have to do that. I make these promises, so I have to carry through on them, and I don't want to leave that series unless you tell me that you've had enough of it, and then I guess I probably would have to leave the series. But so far, so good.
How do you kind of decide, how early do you plan out how long a series is going to be? Did you know that those 2 books in the Legends of Shannara series, did you know that that was going to be a 2-book set at that point?
I didn't, and it was almost written as a 1-and-1, although the same characters appear in the 2. Sometimes I know in advance, exactly. Like with Heritage, when I did Scions, I thought when I started that series it was going to be 3 again, stuck on 3. But when I got through with that and started writing what was essentially Walker Bow's story, I thought, I have to do a story also about the elves. The elves aren't even involved here, and I need a cousin in there, or somebody that's got a connection to the elves. So that became Elf Queen, and I ended up with 4 books, which wasn't actually planned. But sometimes, like with Voyagers of Gerald Shannara, that was a definite 3 books I knew it was going to be. I knew what they were going to be. And this group I started now, the fall, is 4 books, but started out as 3. And it became really clear after the first book that I'd written so many complications into the story that I needed to spend time resolving with so many different plot threads and characters that talking about finishing it in 3 books just didn't seem possible. And I actually have been toying with the idea of taking it to 5. But I think if I do that, you'll just have nothing more to do with me ever.
So Black Elfstone is the first book in that set, and it published last year. Then we have Scar Invasion, which comes out June 19th this year. You're near the end of book 3 in that. How do you feel right now about what you're accomplishing with this chronological ending?
Well, this is an example of where I actually knew what the ending was going to be, and I have known it for a long time, so I'm writing towards that specific end, towards a specific scene at the end that I think it kind of sums up what this whole series has been about. So the best thing I can say is I think I'm getting there. I'm pretty happy with the way the story is developing, but if you write it like this, what you know is that you have a beginning point and an ending point, which usually does not change. But in between, there are talking points or there are plot points that you pencil in. But there's a lot of room. You leave a lot of room for the creative process because you always, no matter how careful you are about plotting things, you always find new things that you want to write about and better ideas and different ways of doing things that you get caught up in that you need to be able to develop as you work along. So that's kind of what's happening here. And what's really been good is that the conclusions of both the last book and and the book that's coming up are kind of cliffhangers, and they're somewhat shocking, particularly with this next book that comes out in June. I know people are going to say, "What is he doing?"
I've read it, and I can say it's. You guys are going to howl after the last page.
Oh, please don't. And then for the third one, I'm about 4 chapters, maybe 3 chapters from the end of the third one, and I just about 2 weeks ago came up with a whole new way of telling this ending with a big surprise. And I thought, well, I don't even know if I can do this. I've written, 26 chapters. Can I do this, or do I have to go back and make major changes? No, don't do that. Don't make major changes. So I read it, and I found out I had not written myself into a corner where I couldn't do it. It will just be more of a surprise because I didn't see it coming either. And if I don't see it coming, then I'm hoping you won't see it coming either. Maybe it'll work.
When it comes to, you mentioned the final scene in the 4th book. How long have you known that final scene? Like, how, when it comes to your process, was it part of the planning process before this series, or does this go back several series?
Oh, I don't, it never pays to think too far ahead. That may sound stupid, but it really doesn't, because the trouble is that things change for you, things change about the way you want to approach something. I've known in general terms the idea of what I wanted to achieve. I knew the feeling I wanted to leave the readers with, and the emotion I wanted to evoke at that closing scene, but I didn't actually see it until I had developed the first book of this series and begun to write it. And as I was doing it, I was starting to see who's going to be in this scene, because that's really crucial to everything. So I saw that, and then I said, how is it going to play out? And I was lucky because I knew right away then. I said, I know how this is going to play. I know exactly what the backdrop is going to be and everything else. So that's not so bad.
You're kind of known for killing characters, right? We can all agree with that. What's our body count going to be at the end of this series?
Oh, I don't know, 50%? I'd actually, I know I get this rap, and I'm always saying, don't get too attached to anybody. But that's just kind of the way I like to approach stories, is that in a society in which there's a lot of violence and a lot of intrigue and a lot of potential for death, people die, and it's not always just the bad people, and it's not always people you think might be the soldier in Star Trek who always dies in every episode. Yeah. Instead, it could be anybody, but of course druids are always in danger because they're right at the front of the lines, and some of the major characters who expose themselves. The thing about fantasy is it works when it's realistic. We want to read it where it's realistic within the context of what you're reading. And if I suddenly start getting cute about the whole thing and say, well, I'm not going to kill any major characters, I'm just going to kill off all these cannon fodder people here, you're going to pick up on it real fast. And that doesn't really make sense in terms of how we know things work. So I try to make this as realistic in comparison to what we know about this world, as I possibly can, because I believe that that's what makes epic fantasy in particular work well. Did I answer that question, or did I just ramble?
No, you did go.
Okay.
So in this next book that comes out in June, which I'm sure he's going to be doing a signing for you people that live in the Seattle area or whatever, he'll be doing a signing, so you guys can come by. And
probably more than one.
Yeah. There's a surprise character that makes an appearance in that book. I'm not going to spoil who it is. How important was it for you to ground this last kind of chronological ending series into with previous books? Yeah, the past for readers.
I thought it was important when I made the announcement to lots and lots and lots of readers over a period of the last couple of years. And so, once you make this promise, you sort of got to keep it, or else they call you on the carpet and say, what the heck? You said you were going to do this. I don't see it happening here. So I thought it would be kind of fun to work in references back. I don't know how many have read the first one yet, so I won't talk about it, but there's an obvious one in there. But there's a bunch during the course of the book that relate back to things that you will recall if you've read all of the other books too. And I thought it should wrap up sort of the way it ended, with hearkening back to some of the familiar characters and descendants of these characters, and magic and creatures and things from out of the past. I tried to bring back Eric Jacks, didn't happen. Sorry about that, but maybe we have something else that works just as well. So I thought it was pretty important that I do it, and it's been kind of fun too to think about how I would do it in a way that would surprise people and perhaps make them feel like, well, here's something that's an old friend from back when.
What's going on with the TV show? I know there's going to be people in the audience that are probably going to ask that question, so I might as well ask it.
TV show?
Yeah, the TV show.
There's a TV show?
Yes.
Well, we started out with MTV. That seemed like a good idea. And that did not work out because then they dropped all scripted programming and said, so goodbye. And that was after we did season 1, which I was happy with. I was not unhappy with that. And then we went to season 2, and they did that one. And then at the end of it, they said, well, we're going to drop the show. So Viacom, which is the parent corporation, kicked it over to Spike. We did not necessarily want to see the show with, but we don't have anything to say about it. So there it was. And so Spike, and let's just say we had a disagreement of sorts, and in the end it got shown, but Spike at the end said, oh, we don't care about this, so we're not going to do anything anymore. So now we are looking elsewhere again, and I think we have maybe one more shot at this, and if we're lucky, it'll get picked up once more, but it's got to have a permanent commitment from whoever we go with if we're going to continue it. And I guess I would like to see that happen, but if it doesn't happen, I probably will still wake up in the morning and go to bed at night, and life will continue, and I will have had that experience, and it was really good in many ways, so I don't object to that. I like the fact that it did primarily what I wanted to do, which was it brought me a whole passel of new readers who had not read the books. Hard to believe that there's any left, but there are. So that was good, and I really liked the people I was working with, and I really liked the actors particularly. They were good, really good, and nice people. So there were a lot of positives about the experience, and I don't really have much to say in the way of negatives, except that obviously I fought tooth and nail about the dialogue. But one of the lessons I learned about this as a writer is that the dialogue doesn't, on the list of important things in filming, dialogue is down here, near the bottom. Unless, of course, it's The Crown or, something of that sort, Masterpiece Theater. The dialogue isn't important. It's the visuals that count. And, like in Marvel, all those Marvel movies, dialogue, who knows, you quote me something, That's nothing. It's only the action and the special effects and so forth, and you just have to accept that as being true. This kills me, of course, but nevertheless, that's the way it is. And so, I was kind of beaten down on that front, but it's been a good education at the same time to find out how things really work when you move out of one medium, publishing, into another medium, filmmaking, and how everything changes around. Another way that things change is in writing, you're the author. Okay, I'm the author. I am the God. I'm God. So I get to decide everything. I get to make all the decisions. I don't have to talk to anybody if I don't want to. I can just do it. Eventually, I have to give it up to my editor, who has a few things to say every time. Always helpful, I might quickly tell, because she's sitting right over there. But it is a whole different process, because in TV, everybody tells you how much they love you. They tell you how much they appreciate your work. They tell you how great your characters are, why this practically writes itself, I was told. Yes, sir, just writes itself. And on about how this is all going to work out just the way you want it to and so forth. And then you discover, after about 10 minutes, that, well, they're going to change something. Well, actually, they're going to change a few things. Well, actually, they're going to change a whole bunch of things. And then from there on in, it becomes, you know, a struggle of survival to see how things are going to go. And in truth, the showrunners, who are the writers, have their own vision of how this ought to happen. And that's always true, always true. No writer goes in to do some other adaptation and says, I'm just going to copy all this down like we read it here. Don't you worry. That would be the single biggest lie in the world that I can think of off the top of my head outside of Washington. So what we have here is an understanding that this is a different medium with a different artistic approach. It's, you know, it's a project that's done by committee. A lot of different people have input, and you have to accept that. Right. Is that long enough for you?
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, all right.
So let's see what time we got here. I will start taking questions here in a little bit. You can begin lining up if you like. Let's talk a little bit more about your other projects while they line up and they prepare. So there's Landover, right? No big, we can't forget Landover.
We are getting Landover. I know, I hear you. I've been hearing from you for years. And I regret that I have not gone back before this time. I will simply say that life has intervened in various ways. But I am signed up and I have been paid, which you know means that's, you know, there's no going back now. I have to write it. So as soon as I finish this 4-book set, which means one more book really of works a year, I'll do the Magic Kingdom book, and that I hope will publish as soon as we do the last of the Shannara books in fall of Shannara. I don't have a book yet. I have ideas, of course, because I always have ideas, and I have some parameters within which I want to work. But I'm keeping those to myself for right now. I'll simply say that I am going to do a Magic Kingdom book as the very next project after Shannara. So all of you who have been waiting faithfully, you won't have to wait too much longer. And if I get excited, maybe I'll do more than one.
Do you think you'll have Ben Holiday be the principal character again, or are you going back with Messiah?
No, I think I'm going back to, I think we'll have Messiah in there as a peripheral character in some way, but I think we need to go back to Ben and Willow and our favorite group of courtiers, that sort of thing. I don't know about I think we have to, I've set it up, if you've read the last book at all, the one that really centers around Messiah, you have to remember that it sort of ends with a suggestion that maybe we haven't seen the last of Nightshade, and indeed you have not. So she'll be front and center, I think, in the next Magic Kingdom book. Yeah.
Anything going on with Word and Void?
No.
No.
No. And nothing going on with the damn movie either. So you know, don't ask me about that. I don't know. I've got. We're playing around a lot. My editor Ann and I have talked a little bit about where to go after I do the next Magic Kingdom book, and I've got some different ideas, and I would kind of like to do a new series. But new series are dangerous because all of you say, what do you mean new series? Where's my Shannara book? Where's my Magic Kingdom book? Why aren't you writing any Word and Void? So I have to approach this cautiously. I have to, train you to think that a new series is a really good idea. Yeah, I like this. I do. I want it. I really do. I'm not there yet. I haven't got that energy right now.
Well, kind of.
Well,
we can bring up something right now if you want.
Well, yeah, sure. I know. I'm doing a book called Street Freaks. This is a one-off that it has nothing to do. It's not fantasy. It's futuristic. It's whatever. So I've written Street Freaks, and it's coming out in October. To differentiate it from what I'm doing with Del Rey, they've agreed to let me publish it with Shawn as a essentially not a self-published book. What would you call it?
Small press published.
Small press published.
Yeah.
So we're going to put it out there and see if there's enough interest in it. But it's a one-off. It's a whole story by its own little self, and I'm hoping that it'll get a good reception because I really like it. I'm kind of wedded to this particular book. It's kind of like a little orphan child out there that needs a home. And when I put a Shannara book out, I don't give 2 minutes thought about whether it'll find an audience because the audience I know is out there. But with Street Freaks, because it's new and because it's not a fantasy and because it has no home yet, I'm kind of excited about what the response might be, and we'll be putting some work in on that as soon as I get past the publication of the next Shannara books, Invasion of the Scar.
Good.
Yeah.
And there's a chat book here. If any of you have not had that chat book, come see me afterward. I'll give you one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have our first question, actually.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to take you back to the early days when you were writing Sword, and since the anniversary is coming up and everything, and just out of a process question, when you were coming through your first book, how do you banish the demons of it's the same derivative of Tolkien, Shakespeare, 7 Greek tragedy or 7 Greek stories that have all ever happened? How do you banish that kind of thought when you're going through your books?
Well, I know this is going to sound weird, but I was writing this book because I really got enamored with Tolkien's work, and because I thought this is really cool, but I hate these appendices. So I want to do a fantasy that uses all of the other input that I've had, using a Tolkien-esque form, but I wanted to put in some references to Faulkner's work and to the homage to the European adventure story writers. I wanted this to be a book that just moved along really rapidly. And at the time, I never gave a single moment's thought to whether or not this was going to be too close to Tolkien. And all I did was, I just wanted to finish the thing, you know, because I'd never finished anything. This was the first book for me. I didn't have anything else. I had a bunch of short stories that I never finished. I had one long space opera that I've sort of finished. But you know, I discarded it all along the way, and I hadn't been writing fantasy, and this was really very new, and I just wanted to see if I could do it. You know how you are with the first book. Can you actually do this? What's it like? So when I did it, then I sent it into and got it picked up by Del Rey, and then Lester said, "This is too close to Tolkien in the first 200, 300 pages. You got to rewrite this." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, it is. But you can do this." And indeed, I learned what the lash could do when it wasn't applied properly, and I rewrote it. And I rewrote it more than once, about 3 times as I recall, to get it to where he was happy enough with it. And he wanted that similarity because nobody else was doing Tolkien fiction at that point. And he said, "This is a huge market. People want this." So I just, you know, I was a neophyte in the business. I didn't know anything. I really did not know anything. I didn't even know any authors. So I was just sort of going along and doing what I was told to do, and then lucky for me, they were right, as it turned out, and it was successful. But it's a concern. It's a concern for every writer. But the thing I learned was, I even brought this up to Lester once upon a time and said, "You know, how's this distinguishing?" He says, "Well, your voice is different." He says, "That's what distinguishes everything. There's nothing new. There's nothing new out there. Everything's been done. You're doing a variation on a theme, you know. So when you're writing it, remember, write it the way you talk. Write it the way you think. You know, don't try to copy somebody's writing. You know, the use of ideas that have been used before. You know, Tolkien wasn't an original. He used them, and so that was, you know, I thought that was pretty good advice. And I think the less time you spend on worrying about that sort of thing, and the more time you spend on what it is you want to say and how you want to say it in your own words. What is your voice? The better off you are as a writer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Brooks. Thank you for coming to Seattle.
I live here. I can't get away.
I just moved here, so I'm enjoying every moment of it. So I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you're here as well. I'm imagining you throughout the years writing your books, and I'm thinking, where were you the most productive and happy, like when you're writing and doing well and ideas are flowing from your head, but also, where were you the least productive? Maybe at a family reunion or a turbulent airplane. I was thinking there might be 2 good ideas of, you know, you sitting on a sofa somewhere typing versus like trying to write on an airplane or.
Well, I don't work well in places with noise. I'm not a product of my son or grandson's generation who study to music, and, you know, the louder the better. I don't function unless it's dead quiet, you know. And so for years I didn't work anywhere except in an office where, you know, I could control everything, hermetically sealed away. But lately I found out that I can write really pretty well on airplanes because, you know, you can't hear anything on airplanes either. And at least I thought not for a long time. And then my wife pointed out to me that I can't hear anyway. And I'm being shipped off to the hearing doctor here, the audiologist, very shortly in order to get that improved. So then I don't know what I'm going to do, but...
That's been 30 years, by the way.
Well, there was some discussion involved, you know. So,
We'll just get something you can turn on and off.
yeah, well, you can. That's right. So I don't know. I think that's it. I think that you have periods of writing when you're really caught up in your work and you're really energized about it, and you always do better then. And periods when you just sit there and you say, you know, not only do I dislike this page, I think the whole book sucks. And why did I write this book? And you have to balance those out and understand that the truth lies somewhere in between on both things.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hello.
Hello.
So in a lot of your recent books, there's been a vein of grimdark kind of just snaking its way in there, and I was wondering if that is just kind of a thing you're playing with right now as far as style, or if that's going to be something we're going to be seeing more of, you know, opening that vein wider in later books.
I don't know. I'm pretty pissed, I'll admit. I mean, I don't like how the world is going. I don't like our government. I don't like anything about the United States right now to speak of. So, you know, except for the fact that people are actually standing up to be heard about a few things. So, you know, you're impacted, your personal life carries over into your writing. There's no question about it. I've always written us with a certain strain of grimdark, but I don't think it's grimdark. You know, grimdark, we have bloody pages after pages of people being eviscerated and so forth. I don't usually do anything like that. And I still don't have any raw sex. I think you can have a sex scene without getting into any of that. You can do it in a couple of well-chosen sentences. That's my approach. I try to make the books realistic when they relate to this world. I try not to do, you know, go too much over. I know sometimes I do get kind of carried away with that. I think that's not true where I am right now, as a matter of fact, with this current set of books. I think it was definitely true with the last couple. But you know, sometimes you just feel this is the urge of this is something you have to write. And when you get a story that you want to do, you have to follow it through. And sometimes it means going in directions you hadn't foreseen at the beginning, or even something that you perhaps would have avoided otherwise. But there's also a tenet that I subscribe to that I think is very important, and that is that if there is a scene that you cannot write because of something you have, an objection you have, or a prejudice you have to write it. You have to write it. You cannot be scared because this is something you can't do. Maybe it won't work out, but you just have to do it. And you know, sometimes I write it and I like it well enough, it just stays in. So maybe some of that is part of what's going on. But I promise you there'll be no grimdark in Magic Kingdom.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is I wrote a fantasy novel. It's terrible, and because I put it aside and then went back and read it, and it was real bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you had that happen? And what did you do? Because I personally felt pretty discouraged after reading and going, oh, I worked really hard on this, and this is not good.
Well, yeah, of course. I've written stuff, a lot of it, mostly between the ages of 10 and 22 or 3, all of which got put aside, some of which got burned. All of it should be burned. But I think that I have to tell you, if you're a writer, that's not going to discourage you. That's just the process. That's what it takes. You have to write, you know, oh God, I almost said the wrong thing. I almost tried to compare that to kissing a girl, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say that you have to make a lot of mistakes to get to a point where you're successful at telling a story in the right way. And it's going to happen again. You know, I know it's going to happen. It has happened. I've started things where I've gotten into it for a ways, and I've said, yuck, you know, this is no good. It's easy to lose your momentum. It's easy to start writing just to put words down, and you read them over and you think, who's going to read these pages? There's nothing here, you know, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should ever be discouraged because you wrote a bad book or you had a bad experience like that. If you really want to do this, you put this aside. This is your learning experience right here, and you might have some more. And most writers, as it turns out, have written a lot of stuff and tried to publish a lot of stuff, and sometimes even did publish it and didn't sell. You know, it didn't work, and it was the beginning of their efforts to get to where they needed to be. So I think that's the answer to that one.
I'll piggyback on that too a little bit. First drafts, 90% of authors, first drafts, they're crap. And they will admit it. And that's why people like Ann Grohl sit here and then they get the chance to edit and stuff. An author always goes back over their first draft and improves it, or tries to.
All right.
And if it turns out bad after that, go on to the next book. I have 2 Trek books. They're awful. They will never see the light of day.
Cool.
You know, I had not thought of it in those terms, but I'm actually giving Anne an opportunity here by writing something that's really bad. I shouldn't be worried about that. I should turn in a half-assed book and say, here, Anne, here's a chance for her to demonstrate her skill. I probably will fly, will it? Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Hi.
I just wanted to say I really loved your book, Sometimes the Magic Happens. I'm one of those that collects writing books, and sometimes they sit, and yours is one of the few that I opened it and couldn't put it down. So thank you for writing that.
Thank you.
My question is, what do you do when you're writing, and I guess it piggybacks on his, and you get stuck in the words? Like, how do you push past that? Do you just take a break and come back to it, or?
Well, that never hurts.
Okay.
I think sometimes you write yourself into a corner, or you write yourself into a dark place or whatever. And I always just, say, oh, screw it, I'm going to go read another book or something like that, for a while, get away. My wife encourages me to do this more than once a week. So, there's no problem with doing that. And then you come back with fresh eyes, and usually with a better perspective on the whole thing, and more determination, and then you can tackle it again. I just think sometimes, and also when you write something that's no good, that's and you recognize it. So this is a warning. Your writing is telling you it wants you to put it out of its misery. Do not let me see the light of day. Go back and do it the way you know it ought to be done, and it's a kind of a wake-up call. That serves its purpose in the writing process, and you need to be on the lookout for that. If you read something, especially if you write something and you don't think it's any good, put it away for a day or two, and then go back and read it again. And if it still doesn't look like it's any good, then it needs to be excised. Sometimes though, you go back and you read it and you say, hey, that's not as bad as I thought it was. Then you can just maybe tease it around the edges a little bit to be better.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I cannot see a thing.
My name is Willow.
Oh, there you are. I'm sorry.
And
Hi.
I live in Tenino, Washington. And my question was, why do you like to write books?
Whoa. Why do I like to write books? That's a very good question. Do I have a very good answer? Maybe, maybe not. I don't like to write books. I love to write books. It's my favorite thing to do in the whole world. I do it because I don't think I would be happy if I wasn't writing. I write all the time. And when I'm writing, or when I've finished writing something, I feel really good about myself. And if I'm not writing, and I haven't done it for a while, and I've kind of fallen away from it, then I have members of my family who tell me that I'm being grumpy, or worse, crabby, the words, all kinds of words. But basically I'm not being, who they think I ought to be, so they tell me to, go write something or whatever. And then I get back, and I'm okay again. And it's like putting something together with blocks, like if you were building a castle out of blocks or something, you finish it and you've made something and it's yours, you did it. And that's how I feel about books. It's kind of the same thing. I'm just using words instead of blocks. And I use those to make something that is important to me. It means something. And I do. I love my books. I do like them. I stand up here and defend them too. And I've given my best effort, and I think that's something everybody should strive for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can lift it up. Hey, so you started the Shannara series in 1977. So most kind of pop culture things that go like that long are usually written by a lot of people. As like one person, what's like your major well of inspiration to keep everything going?
I don't know, debt? I think, well, all right, so first of all, I began writing Sword of Shannara in 1968. So now you can go, whoa, 50 years, oh, you old dog. Well, at any rate, I've been writing a long time, it's true, and I think you keep, I don't know, I didn't start out to write this massive series. I really didn't. I started out to see if I could write one book. And then I wrote, 3, and then I said, I'm not going to do this anymore, the heck with it. So I went off and did Magic Kingdom for 3 books. And then I got interested in the story that it was a Magic Kingdom, Shannara story, went back to it again. And it's always a case of what speaks to you, and the more I wrote the Shannara books, the more I wanted to continue with them. And obviously the readership was there, so there was a reason to go continue with them for that reason as well. And I liked the idea that I could do this by, doing 3 books or two sets of books or something like this, and then skip over and do something else and go off and do a Star Wars book, write the little memoir, sometimes the Magic Works, write Word and Void. So there were opportunities to do all that, and then recently I had Street Freaks as something I just felt like I had to do. It was time to do something different, so I wrote this. But the other part of the equation is that I learned early on that when you're working in a world that's as vast as the 4 lands and as complex, that you can't do it all in a few books. So you have to decide. You're either going to do it partially and leave the rest of it to the imagination of the reader, or you're going to try and fill it in along the way. And readers, as it turns out, want more of same. Hence, mystery series, which go on and on and on and on, don't they?
Yeah.
It's because the readers are enamored with the character and with the setting and with all of that. With fantasy, it's like you're world building the whole time you're writing this. And the world building process is a whole different aspect of things, because nothing can be taken for granted except as you've created it. You created the whole world. And I've always been kind of like that. And so that's been part of the impetus for continuing with it as well, I guess. So I don't know. I think I'll just, we'll see. Maybe another 20, 30 years I'll keep writing. We'll see.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. I'm a teacher, and thanks. When I was my student's age, in about grade 6, I read your books, particularly Magic Kingdom books. And I'm noticing now I'm having a really hard time getting my students to read books that don't come in graphic novel form. And I'm wondering how you'd feel, or if you'd thought about collaborating with someone to make at least the Magic Kingdom books or something into a graphic novel series.
Great question.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. I want that graphic novel.
Right?
This is a problem, and part of the problem has to do with the fact that I am so much a book person to the core. I just don't give a rat's behind about anything else. And so I've dabbled in some of these other things, like graphic novels and so forth. And I always say when the people come up and say, well, why don't you collaborate with anybody? And I say, all my report cards say does not play well with others. I could collaborate with somebody, and what they would do is I would write the book, and they would take a look at it and just tell me if they saw anything that needed changing, and then I would say, you don't have anything to say about it, and take it back again, and that would be that. So collaboration for me is not actually something in my lexicon. So I don't know. I think that there have been some opportunities to do some of these types of things. I think if you're patient for a little bit longer, I'll be gone. And as soon as I'm gone, I'm sure all of this will come to pass in some form. Shawn's already got my trunk load of manuscripts that have not seen the light of day that he's getting ready to publish. No, he's going to Del Rey where he's going to get them published. Or he's going to ghostwrite them or whatever. And I don't know. I think it's tough. There's a lot of good things out there, and I've had real good support over the years from teachers and librarians. Those have been my bread and butter for all this time. And I've been recommended by them for years and years and years, and I've gone to their conferences and so on. And I always want to say how important it is that they incorporate what kids are reading out of school into the school curriculum. And that wasn't true back when I was starting out. Nobody would have dared to suggest that we should put fantasy in the school curriculum. Are you kidding? What next? Porn? They didn't want that stuff in there. Read the classics. Here, read about this big white whale again. Here, what about the Scarlet Letter? And you want to say, okay, that's right, but still, we're losing our kids as readers way by too many numbers. I want to see that part of it, and I want to be part of the process, but at the same time, I have to do what works for me. And some of the other writers are better at doing the things that you're talking about than I am.
It's sad though, because what you do, and Redwall is another example where
Redwall.
I would just love to see the kids understand what it feels like, and they just won't pick it up. And it's not that they wouldn't love it if they picked it up, but they won't pick it up because there's so many beautiful graphic novels that they'll pick up first.
Yeah, well, there's also gaming, there's Marvel Comics, there's Marvel comic movies, there's DC, blah, blah, blah. I know this, and I don't actually know what the answer is. I mean, in my family, I have the same problem. Everybody else is. They don't all read. They don't read. They do a lot of gaming in my family, that sort of thing. And how you bring somebody around for that is pretty hard to say. I'm not real sure I know the answer to that.
It's safe to say that we will pass on your comment to the publisher so they can hear it.
Yeah. And
you could always take a look at The Wrinkle in Time. They did a really good job of making Wrinkle in Time into a graphic novel.
I hope so. I haven't seen that movie's not out yet, right? Oh, it's a graphic novel. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, she's dead, so.
Maybe it would be better if she wasn't.
Is that right? I don't know. And I think about it periodically, but I just haven't proceeded to do anything about it. And if I wanted to do something about it, I'd probably have to be more proactive than I am about getting somebody who would do a good job on a graphic novel. And part of the problem you have as a writer, or this writer has anyway, is finding time just to do the work that he does, and to get the work, to meet the contractual agreements, to turn things in, and you have all these other projects with TV and one thing or another, and it gets to be a lot. But I will certainly take to heart what you've said, and I will give it some thought, because nobody's expressed that to me recently, and I do not know if there's a way to do this that would work for me or not.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Hello. I just wanted to follow up on the question she just asked. I actually started on audiobooks at a very young age, back when they were still on tape. And I was just wondering if you had maybe some opinion on listening, if somebody were to listen to your book versus read it, because it's always gotten me to get through books a lot more than if I were to read it, because the way I read is very slow.
I have an opinion, all right? I think it's perfectly fine. You know, I think books on tape are a necessary part of the reading experience. I listen to them. And a lot of my readers that's how they get to my work, is they have the time to listen to them through commutes and one thing or another. And so it's another alternative to a way to access the material and enjoy the story. I wish that we had better delivery systems than we do, and that they were more reliable. I've had a problem getting my books out there and keeping them out there. But I've got a lot of them too, so, you know, sometimes you have to pick and choose on what's going to be there. And sometimes you don't have anything to say about it. You know, you can control writing it, you can't control distribution. But it's a problem. That's a question.
Thank you.
Got a couple minutes left. If you have a question,
Thanks for
please.
the opportunity to speak with you, Mr. Brooks. You're well revered. First books I ever read were the mythology section in the library when I was just a little kid. And that opened the doors to what technically was the fantasy that's been rolling around. And then you're kind of one of the founding, Tolkien came out and gave us the biggest tools, and all of us picked up those tools and made different things, and you've made masterpieces. From that came the chainmail and the Gary Gygax and the D&D era, which gave us those tools at home. What was have you ever had any collaborations with them? Did you ever meet those guys? Did you know, do any work on any modules, or, you know, for sourcing material and such? And how did you feel about that whole genre?
Does not play well with others.
I had a feeling.
I think, you know, I don't know those particular people. I do know some other people that have talked about collaborations. And I keep coming back to the same thing. I'm really only interested in books. And so for me to do something like that, I'd have to have somebody who is going to take charge and be proactive on the whole project in order to make it work. The other thing is if I did not mention it, when I was reading Tolkien, I wanted all those appendices to go away. I feel like if you are a scholar, as Tolkien was, and you're writing a history of a countries, and if you're developing languages, that's great. If you don't care about that sort of thing as part of the story you're writing, it just gets in the way. And so I made a decision a long time ago not to do any pronunciation guides, not to do any appendices, not to do any of that. I just wanted people to read the stories and enjoy them. It was the quickest, fastest, easiest way to get to young people, number one, but also for me as a writer, that's kind of the way I work. So I wasn't real enamored with the idea then, and I'm still not really enamored with the idea for the kind of work I'm doing.
Well, you should give dungeon mastering a try. I think you'd be pretty good at it.
A benevolent dictator, right?
I like the vote of confidence.
Right.
You know, I don't game either. I know this is going to cause a real ripple. I don't care. I don't game. I did some gaming early on, and it just uses up a huge amount of my time, and I don't have time. So I had to let all that go. I let TV go. I know, pretty soon you're going to think, what a frickin' Luddite. But I don't do any of that stuff because with what I have to do with connecting with my family once in a while and writing, that takes up practically all of the free time I have. And trying to work all these other, you know, I'd rather go to movies, I'd rather travel. I travel all the time. Those are the things that really interest me. I like to get out and see what's going on in the world. I go on tour quite a bit, as you know. And so there's only so much time you have, and you have to decide how to use it. And I made that decision years ago when I discovered that when I turn the television on, I look at it. It does not matter what's showing. I'm staring at it and I'm listening. you know, what the heck is that about? It's an addiction, it really is. And so I had to say, no. So I just don't watch TV unless it's a finite item or it's a streaming program anymore, because, you know.
You read a lot. What books would you recommend to this audience that are not Terry Brooks books?
Oh, dang, you took my whole spiel. You know, I don't know, there's so many great books. How much time have we got?
5 minutes.
All right, 5 minutes. I just finished a book by Ben Winters called The Last Policeman. I highly recommend you read that series. There's 3 of them, I think, altogether. I have not yet read the last 2, but I'm going to find out what a police officer is doing, solving a murder with such diligence when the world is ending. But anyway, I know I'm going to get the answer to this. I recommend that. I just finished reading Immortals, a gentleman from Moscow, and Rules of Civility, which I recommend because he is a tremendous stylist. It has nothing to do with fantasy whatsoever. The stories all take place back in the 20s and 30s, but boy, can that guy write, and it's a terrific story. The last couple times I wrote, when I was talking to people, I was talking about how wonderful Billy Lynn's Halftime Walk was, which is a story about a bunch of squad of Afghan or Iraqi-based soldiers who have been brought home because they were heroes in a firefight. And the whole book is about halftime at the Dallas Cowboys Thanksgiving Day. Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I recommend that heartily because it will tell you more about the American culture than anything you'll read for. I recommend Jeff Vandermeer, Annihilation, Authority. I can't remember the third one. Anyway, it's a movie. You can go see the movie too, but read the book. It will test your patience, but it is so good. Really an incredible series. So I read that. Let's see, what else am I reading now? Oh, I'm reading The Boy on the Bridge. Not The Boy on the Bridge, that's next. I'm reading The Girl with All the Gifts, which is sort of like a new story of aliens who eat each other and us. But it's got a lot more going for it too, and I recommend that.
Nightmares. Right
Yeah, I give you a lot of nightmares. They're out there. They seem like normal children. I knew children would eat their parents if given the chance. And the parents the people who are the adults in this thing all keep referring to them as little monsters when it starts out, and I think, why are they calling their children little monsters? And then it turns out, well, they are, as a matter of fact. You know, even they just look like children, but they're really little monsters. And it was gripping. It was a terrific story. I'm in the middle of that one. What else? Dog what?
Robert Craze.
Oh, well, Robert Craze. I love Robert Craze, yeah. That's mysteries. I like mystery stories that are cleverly done. Same thing with John Connolly, who writes stories. They're detective stories, but there's a paranormal bent to them. And there's another world of shadow figures that are involved in the solving of the crimes and so forth. So, you know, I mean, I read all over the place. That's the thing I really need to repeat, which I keep saying. As a writer, it's very important that you don't just read this thing that you're writing. You know, just read the genre that you're working in. You need to read outside that area to get fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. And I'm always telling people that, you know, I know you're reading fantasy, that's why you read my books. I'm really grateful, but I'm telling you there's so much else out there that is wonderful. And you know, don't be afraid to read it, even if you think it's going to be crap. If you hear enough people tell you it's good, there's a reason for it. Give it a try, see what you think. And for me, it's a study in, you know, how other writers write. And sometimes I come back and I think, oh my God, I wish I'd written that book. That is so good. And sometimes I come back and say, well, let's bury him in the backyard. So.
All right, we're getting the hook over here. We got 1 minute left. I will mention that Terry will be signing across the hall in the writer's block directly after this. The Scar Invasion, Book 2 of the Fall of Shannara comes out June 19th. I think Terry is attending Denver Comic-Con for that, so any of you that might be in Denver, stop by. And then Street Freaks comes out in October. So, yeah. So thank you everybody for coming.